I'm very excited to have Jim Leo and Alex Wanee joining today. Jim Leo is the founder and president of PitFit Training, an industry leader in motorsport-specific human performance training, as well as fitness, neurocognitive, and postural programs for all populations. Alex Wanee is performance director at PitFit Training and has been in the human performance industry since 2010. The roster of champions that have become a part of the PitFit family is a who's who of auto racing. Drivers such as Scott Dixon, Tony Kanaan, Dario Franchitti, Will Power, William Byron, J.R. Todd, Alexander Rossi, and James Hinchcliffe are just a few of the many drivers who have trained with PitFit. PitFit Training has become its own ladder system for racing success, with numerous drivers starting in the program in lower level series and staying with the training as they graduate to the top levels through programs like the Mazda Road to Indy. Drivers such as Charlie Kimball, Spencer Piggott, Pippa Mann, and Gabby Chavez have continued with PitFit Training through various stages of their advancing careers. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
We're good, man. Good to see you, Robert.
Well, looking forward to discussing your training at PitFit, talk through some of the driver-specific Iron Neck training you've developed over the years, and get a better understanding of the conditions that drivers are subjected to and how neck strength is relevant. So we'll just kind of jump into it and start looking a little bit into what the conditions actually are in the driver's seat of an IndyCar vehicle. Can you kind of talk to the forces that drivers are subjected to?
Yeah, it's one of these things that as time goes on, the cars have gotten faster, the grip level has gotten much more dramatic, so the cars stick much more. So that enhances the G loads on the body. Everything from basically from your toes to your nose is being forced up to 4 to 5 Gs multiple times in a race event. So you have the stress of having to physically steer the car, because there is no power steering in IndyCar. It's one of the few, it's probably the only major racing series that doesn't have power steering. NASCAR, Formula One, those races are it can be physical at times, but with the power steering, it makes it far less physical for the entire body. The heat can be an issue in IndyCar, not as critical because of the open cockpit. That has been in the past. This year, there's actually, with the aero screen, which is a new advent for this season, it's now a safety protocol where the screen goes over top of the driver from a safety standpoint, and that's going to create a little more heat into the car. So that has been an issue that we've been working on through some protocols. And then you have obviously the dramatic stress of driving 200 plus miles an hour while having to manipulate dials, listen to directions in your earpiece while other cars are going by you, and having to hit braking points and all. So all those things combined, it makes for a very stressful, chaotic type of situation. And the heart rates are running in the 150 to 175 heart rate the entire race. So it's a fairly physical endeavor that people don't quite understand.
And how do these conditions kind of change throughout a track? Obviously, every track is different. You've got different conditions in them. But how do those conditions change throughout a track as well as over the course of an entire race as you start to see fatigue later on?
Well, if you're talking about, for example, the difference, the 3 main tracks you're going to encounter in IndyCar racing, you're going to have ovals, street courses, and road courses, and they all have different stresses on the body. An oval will have very little in the way of posterior and anterior G loads, so it's more lateral Gs, and it's pushing in one direction. You're turning in one direction the entire time. That is affected by the amount of grip level and the speeds and the banking of a track. So if you take a smaller track like Iowa, which is a 1 mile oval with fairly high banking, there's literally 0 time. They call it an oval. There's no straightaway. So it's really, you're turning left for the entire race, and you're having to hold your breath like a fighter pilot into those high-speed corners. That's a physical track, one of the hardest tracks on the circuit. And then you take a track like Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where there's long straights, the corners, there's really 4 corners, 4 straightaways on there, because in between corners 2 and 3, there's a short chute, which is a short straightaway. Then in between, the long straightaway is the length of a football field. You can relax a little bit. But that's a longer race. And those kind of races are very, very different. Then you get into street courses, which are made on, they're temporary street courses, which means that a downtown city area is sectioned off and barricades are put in place around basically streets that the average person would drive on. So you encounter all the things that you think are a smooth street, driving your car at 40, 30 miles an hour, suddenly at a speed of 200 miles an hour. Every single bump that you encounter becomes dramatic and very bumpy. So those are the street courses, and they don't get quite as much straightaway speed on a lot of those because the straights aren't as long, but they're very, very technical. And then the road courses are permanent courses that are built just for racing. And so when those are designed with undulating terrain as far as the corners and as far as long straights, and those are made for more of a flowing type track. And those can be extremely fast with tight corners, much more speed you'll encounter on the straightaways on those than you would on a city course. All of those combined means the driver, and obviously this is our opinion, you have to be balanced in all types of tracks. You can't be an oval specialist or just a street course specialist. You have to learn to drive them all. And that changes. I mean, that basically, based on the track you're doing, there's different stresses you'll encounter as time goes on. Ovals require a heck of a lot more concentration than road and street courses. Ovals, you're basically going around and around and around and around. So there can be a point where your attention span, if it's not focused the entire time, one little inherent change in your focus could create havoc for yourself or other drivers or that kind of a thing. Road and street courses, I mean, it's kind of like riding a road bike versus a mountain bike. On a mountain bike, you really can't afford to take your mind off of what's in front of you, because one moment you're going straight and the next moment you're making a sharp turn and then you're going down a hill. So it's kind of forced upon you. And all of those things, as time goes on, as fatigue sets into the driver, they can make mistakes in any of those circumstances. And that's kind of where we come in with our training.
Yeah, so anyone who follows you guys on Instagram, social media, you see a lot of physical aspects of the training that are combined with the mental. Alex, can you kind of talk through your approach to how you integrate the mental challenges to the physical challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one thing to do that cognitive or mental training when you're not stressed. But once you incorporate different types of stress, whether that's, like the physical stress of driving the car, the environmental stress, like the heat, that completely changes the way the brain operates. So what we try to do is we try to simulate those same physical and environmental stressors for the drivers within the training session, and then subject them to some of that mental training.
Can you kind of explain a couple of the different tools that you guys use?
Yeah. So we have quite a few different tools that we use. We have I'd say our most utilized tool is the synaptic sensory station. So that allows us to train many different visual performance traits. We have FitLight, which is basically just a motion sensor light system. And actually we have a device that we developed, Jim's brainchild, the race trainer. So we fasten the FitLights to them, and they have weighted steering. So they're steering from light to light as opposed to just, waving their hands in front of them. And then we have Synaptic also makes strobe glasses, which our drivers have, they've really seen benefit from just working on speeding up the processing when their eyes are converging or diverging off different objects.
Yeah, Jim, you talked a little bit about the G-forces that drivers are experiencing in IndyCar. Can you explain how the neck and core are affected by these G-forces?
Yeah, and it is something that I think, people don't understand how the impact that has on everything that you do. They just see driving a car as driving your regular street car. But at high speeds, everything moves faster. When you throw the G load into that, now you've got this gravitational force pushing against all aspects of your body, and especially the neck, and that can compromise your ability to perform that task. It's kind of a hindrance to what you're doing. It's almost like somebody, like a mosquito that just won't stop pestering you. It's just, you're trying to avoid it, but you can't really do that. With the neck, absolutely, the G forces can cause the neck to, if the neck isn't strong enough, it can cause the head to move in a position that is not natural, as not desirable, I should say. And that forces your vision, which normally is in tune with the way your head is sitting, to now suddenly have to shift your focus out of the corner of your eye, which now, you're not trained for that. You're not familiar with that. So now you're having to make decisions based on, a driver on an oval or even on a street course. They're looking the corner ahead. So they're not looking straight ahead like you would normally do in a street car. When they're going into a corner, they're already looking past that corner and they're looking to the next corner. That you have to do that. You have to see what's ahead of you. So if you are compromised with your vision because of your position due to a weak neck, now suddenly your ability to do that as efficiently as possible is diminished. If we don't have the neck trained to the point where it can hold the head up and allow your vision to stay in line of where you want to see, that compromises your safety in the car and obviously those on the track around you. So it's critical to have that neck strength in all different areas of the neck, not just posterior, anterior, lateral. The neck, as it goes into a corner, it's not just pushing on the side of the head. As you drive through the corner, everything's turning. So now the load is here, 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 and it's constant. There's no other device that we've used besides the iron neck that allows us to train all angles of the neck to the entire range of motion of driving into a corner like a race car driver has to.
Yeah, when I came to visit last year, you had a handful of drivers that were going through an iron neck circuit, and you had, I believe it was 3 different stations. One was going through a payloft press with iron neck. One was basically, performing this upper body fatigue with iron neck, changing different angles. And then the last was in your driver trainer and changing the kind of more closely simulating what you experience in a car. Can you kind of walk us through each of those exercises and explain, the goals that you have in mind for the drivers for each of those exercises?
I think that's a good exercise. I mean, that's a good question for Alex. Alex is the performance director, really designs a lot of these programs. I have input into that for sure. But a lot of it is information that we glean from our questions from the drivers. And as he does basically more of the programming, I'm going to defer that to him.
Yeah. So we're always looking to combine aspects of the different stressors that the drivers face. So with that circuit in particular, the Pawloff hold with the iron neck combines both the neck and the core together, as opposed to just simply isolating the neck. Because when you're getting G forces on the neck and having to resist those G loads, it's also, you're also experiencing equal amounts of G loads on the core. So this works to combine those two, or get those two to work together to maintain the ideal posture in the car. Obviously, upper body with the lack of power steering is going to be a big issue as well. So, we want to, train the drivers to be able to generate that force that they need to with the upper body to, muscle the car through a corner while also experiencing the stressors on the neck. And then, obviously, with the race trainer, with the weighted steering, you're getting a little bit of that as well. But we're also adding a visual aspect into that as well, where they're having to react, and then we are, moving the resistance in a way to simulate where they would be feeling that resistance while they're in the car making, a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn.
Yeah, so you've trained drivers who compete, not just in IndyCar, but in NASCAR and drag racing, just to mention a couple. Can you speak to the differences in the impact on the body between these three types of racing?
Yeah, you've got very, very similar in one respect from a visual standpoint. The cognitive stress is different, but it's also the same. The physical side of it, you can take something like NASCAR that, physically is not as demanding as, say, IndyCar or Formula One. You have power steering, you have a cooling system that cools the driver. Cockpit temperatures, it's a closed cockpit, so it's much, much hotter. But you don't have to deal with the muscle fatigue. And also, making contact with another car in IndyCar is never a good thing. If it happens, it's one of those rare circumstances. And if you do, there's a 50-50 chance that that's going to create the situation where one of the two drivers will lose control of the car. In NASCAR, it's just part of racing. They bump into each other to help draft a little bit, to push competitors or teammates ahead. So you don't have that same fear of making contact. But you have with NHRA and drag racing, you don't have the same physical stress that goes from the physical side of driving the car, because you're basically, once the car is staged, the heart rate is elevated, but it's a 3-second period where the car launches. You have to do a little bit of steering. There's a sequence with the clutch and the accelerator that it has to be done right, and that makes the difference. But it's all about speed. How fast can you jump ahead of the competitor at the starting line? And it's a very different situation. So when you take those all together, you've got to make lightning fast decisions in all of those, and make the right decision. Making a decision is only effective if it's the right decision. Making the wrong decision faster just gets you into trouble faster. So it's one of these things where, one sport like drag racing, there's a big buildup, and then it's over. And NASCAR, you don't really have the stress levels that you would encounter in an IndyCar for the most part. But there's also, contact as part of the sport. In IndyCar, you've got very high speeds, a car that is, while it's made as safe as possible, really isn't what you want to be in to crash, because there are much bigger ramifications for that than a big, 3,500 pound stock car versus a 1,500 pound Indy car made of fully carbon fiber versus sheet metal. Very, very different. So, the stress for the Indy car is certainly going to be harder. The way we train them, it can be a little bit different, the way that we do things with them. And every series, and we talk about these three series, but there's also sprint car racing, there's karting, there's junior formula series, there's all sorts of other series that there's some basic template training that we would do across the board, and then it elevates to a certain level, and it deviates into specificity for this particular series based on the duration of the sport, the physical stress, the conditions, all those things. So there's a lot of variables that will go into the variety of the training.
Right. So it's great to see you guys just open back up. Wanted to hear, how you guys were impacted by COVID, and how you guys have been able to kind of pivot in some of your decision making over that time period.
I mean, I'll jump on that. I mean, it was something that, when this thing first started, we already had a really good online program that Alex had started when he was an intern with me many, many years ago, and kind of did on his own. And it was so good that I brought him on board and eventually made him a partner in the company, because it was a very, very solid platform that we as a team have evolved. So we were somewhat prepared already for this through our online coaching program that we use. The online program basically is used with every single driver. Even the ones that come into our gym are still following this kind of a program. But but the funny thing is my wife and I were going down to the first IndyCar race in St. Petersburg. And we learned that it had just started. This was in March, I believe. And we at the last moment decided, once we started hearing that there were some issues at the race, then we found out that fans couldn't go in. And even though we have the highest level credential, they were only allowing what they call essential personnel. And I didn't fit into that category. So we decided not to go. But then as a staff, we had met that week discussing the possibility of this happening. As soon as the race was canceled, we organized a meeting for Sunday morning with all of our drivers from IndyCar. Conference, big conference call. We had a nurse sit in on this as well to answer questions. And we spent about an hour explaining all of our procedures that we were going to do with them. The nurse answered questions that were unrelated to racing. Some of the drivers have small children. They weren't sure. So it gave them a confident feeling that we were taking this approach the proper way. And then the following Tuesday, they shut down everything. And that's when, so we loaned out equipment. We continued, we have private members as well. We basically continue our programming with these people. A lot of the online clients, they had their situation changed because now they were going to be working out at home or they didn't have a gym. So the coaches had to kind of modify the training to fit their needs. And one of the things that we focused on early, and I knew this was something that we could get through, and I think our staff was a little bit concerned about it, but I explained, the company's been around for over 20 years. We've been through 9/11, the recession of 2008. We're still here. Unlike a lot of other companies, we get through this. And, it was a big team effort to do that, but we did it. And the ability for us to rebound and loan out equipment, that we had the ability to do that and have a great online coaching program and have dedicated staff and have amazing clients who were going to ride the tide, so to speak. I think it was a combination of things that allowed us to continue. We didn't chase new clients. We didn't chase new business. We just took care of what got us to where we are, and we didn't skip a beat. What it did give us the opportunity to do, there was a lot of downtime for the staff. We all work from home, and we didn't come in here that often, but it allowed everyone to kind of go back to some of their continuing education and learn some things, modify some things. I, in my role, was able to secure a number of new partnership deals that I just didn't have the time to do in the past. But now that's all I really had to do was reach out to sponsors and partners and develop things. So it allowed us to grow a lot of new things. We have a lot of ideas with like this with Zoom. We talked about doing, and it's one of those things. Alex and I are kind of attention deficit focused at times, so to speak. And so, we had a million new ideas. Not all of them have come to fruition, but it gave us the opportunity to sit down and focus on these new ideas versus coming up with a new idea and, half an hour later it's forgotten because you've got something else you got to do. So we came out of this, in my opinion, stronger than a lot. And we have redefined the way we're doing things in a lot of ways, but all for the positive. So we actually come out of this stronger than I would say anybody else in that respect.
That's awesome. So, in addition to all the Indy guys that you train, you train a lot of Indy Lights drivers, and you've had a lot of those guys kind of go throughout the career. How do you see the cancellation of the Indy Lights season impacting these drivers? I know there's discussion of, kind of what the next season will be, but, how do you see that significant downtime impacting them? And, are there possibly other avenues that they'll be pursuing during this time?
I'll let Alex take this. I'll just say one thing. Our drivers have won the Indy Lights Championship every year except one since 2007. Every year we have a wall full of all our champions. And I will say this year we will not win the championship. There's no championship. But Alex is going to kind of dig into that. And it's not just Indy Lights. It's the feeder series from USF 2000 to the Mazda series. There's a number of tiers that we work with drivers all the way up. And, obviously not having one of them there will have an impact on us.
Yeah. So I mean, from our process and how we work with them, it doesn't really change a whole lot. In fact, you know, more time off essentially gives us like a full year off season. So, you know, I think the biggest thing is them missing out on just another year of experience, which you need that time in the car. You need that experience to prepare yourself for the next level. So, you know, it's going to be extremely difficult for them to go, you know, over, you know, a year and a half, really without getting in the car, at least for a race. You know, so, you know, I'd say our goal with our Indy Lights drivers and other drivers whose series season have been canceled is, you know, it's the approach that we always take. You know, our goal in the training process is to prepare the drivers for every single stressor that they're going to face, so that they can go out and execute their skills at 100% from lap 1 to the end of the race. So, you know, while, you know, they're going to probably, you know, experience some, you know, some rust in skill execution once they start getting back out on track, whenever that is, you know, we will have them completely prepared to handle, you know, every single stressor that they're going to face, so that, you know, their focus can entirely be on getting back up to speed as far as their on-track skills are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is kind of sad that this series that has been strong for so many years is having to take a hiatus. I think if anybody watching is a fan, they'll notice the fields have been smaller. The thing about the Road to Indy program is, maybe some people aren't aware, but it's one of the few ladder systems that rewards the champions to go to the next level. So if you win a championship in one of the tiers, you were given a full season in the next level up at no cost to you. That's an amazing incentive for drivers from not just the United States, North America, but from around the world to come in and say, instead of just going to the typical, you know, European series, you'll run a junior series. And then in order to go to the next level, that just means someone's going to write a bigger check. The costs get higher and higher and higher. And this is, you know, the beautiful thing about the Road to Indy is you can win the Mazda, the Pro Mazda Championship, and then you will have a full season of Indy Lights in your pocket and without any cost at all to you. That's huge. So the problem, I think, is going to be the Indy Lights driver who won the championship last year, which was Kyle Kirkwood. We're not sure. They just announced this, and that's a shame. But I'm hoping what that's going to do is, you know, in my opinion, maybe they'll align the 3 series and make them into 2. So there's not as much of a difference between them. There's some other great series, though, that are out there coming up. The U.S. Formula 3 and Formula 4 that we're partnered with as well. Great series that doesn't cost as much money, but great leadership. People are coming out of there, and there's a lot of rewards for that as well. So, you know, it's one of those victims of this whole COVID crisis. But I think smart people like Dan Anderson, who runs the Road to Indy, smart businessman, there's a reason he does things like that. Just like Roger Penske does those things for IndyCar. There's a plan to benefit from that, dropping the series for the year. It'll benefit and become better for 2021, I feel.
Right. So kind of looking a little bit at the history of PitFit, you know, you don't just get a roster of big names by, you know, being a great trainer. Can you share a little bit about the genesis of PitFit training and, you know, how you've developed these relationships over the past couple decades?
You know, just doing the right thing. I mean, the simplest terms, you know, I think it's just something I was gleaned through working for Roger Penske for a number of years on how to do business. And I think having a mentor in that capacity, whether it's directly or indirectly, is very smart for any businessman or any person who's trying to better themselves. You take the things that will benefit you and you learn, and, you know, you can't just copy what someone else does. You have to basically take bits and pieces, and, you know, I'll never be Roger Penske, but that's okay, because I'm trying my best to be close to him, but I've become the best Jim Leo I can be. And that's how you have to take that approach. and that's kind of how I've always treated this, is I've made amazing connections in this business that have led to other connections, maintain these friendships with some amazing people that I still have to this day, that's got me started in this. And there's a number of people that are still around that I see at the track or I'm great friends with. And then that just leads to other connections. And it gets to the point where as you get older, you almost can't remember everybody, which unfortunately does happen, but you do the best you can. And the nice thing is, when I got started doing this, there literally was nobody doing this in North America, at least. And I didn't even know what I was actually doing in the beginning. I just knew there was something there, but I didn't know, but I know I had to keep moving forward I would figure it out. And it did. And that has led to our name being ingrained in the motorsports industry across the world in a major way. And that has allowed us to make contacts, or people will call me. And, the big joke I always have is people assume that because I've started this, I know everything. I don't know everything. I have great people, Alex, Kinsey, and others who know more than I do in certain areas, but I'm totally fine with that, because I know at the end of the day, to grow this entity to the point where it can help more and more drivers, you have to take your role and be the best at your role possible. So that's what I've kind of taken, that philosophy, and maintain these relationships over the years. And I think the biggest thing you have to do is really toss your ego out and say, look, all I want to do is help you get better. And this is whether it's a truck driver or a mechanic or a race car driver or an engineer, whatever it is, you go out there and you say, look, I'm here for you, whatever it takes. And that is symbolic of the way that we treat all of our people, and why we've been so successful is that our clients understand that we will, no stone unturned, whatever we do. If we show them a product, maybe it's the iron neck or whatever, a drink, we're not going to just turn something over to them that we're not sure if it works or not. They trust us to do the right thing at all times. And that's always been my approach across the board. And that, I think, as and Alex and Kinsey and our staff, they've adopted that. And so they know that, this is a tricky sport. It isn't, we've lost, I've lost some very close friends in this sport. It's a very dangerous sport, and that's just part of it. And you have to be prepared for that. And I think our team knows that our number one goal is to make the driver safer. Everybody in the industry knows we're there to make them safer and perform better. And that's allowed us to grow across the board to the level we are now.
I'd love to hear both your takes on this, but having worked with guys like Tony Kanaan and Scott Dixon for many years, what's a unique attribute that you've seen in them specific to their training that has made them successful for such a long time period?
That's an Alex. Good one.
Yeah, I'd say it's actually funny you ask, because I'd say it's competitiveness. And I think it was like, we were talking with somebody in the gym earlier this week, talking about, the Michael Jordan docuseries, The Last Dance, and just his incredible drive. But that's something that we get to witness every single day from several of our drivers. I think what sets the Scott Dixons, the Tony Kanaans, the Alexander Rossi's apart is that they have this competitive drive that is unrivaled by anybody that I've ever come into contact with, and just an absolute burning desire to get better in any single way they can. If they can get 1,000% better, they're going to do whatever they can to get that. So I think when you couple that with just natural skill, that's what makes those guys so special.
And they keep doing it. It's very motivating for us. And we've been blessed with having drivers like Scott Dixon, who I've been with since, 1999 or something. It's a long time. And Tony, I've worked with a lot. We've had these drivers in our program. James Hinchcliffe, I first started with him in 2004 as he was 16. And here he is, married and, a professional race car driver. And there's just so many of these drivers that we've worked with throughout the years. And you know, the nice thing is that there's other drivers that are coming into our program that will see that these drivers have been doing this for so long and they are still pushing themselves in every possible way to make themselves better, to raise their game, even though from the perspective of these younger drivers, they are the game. I mean, they are it. You can't get any better, but they never feel that way. And they see that and they want to be stronger. They want to be faster. They want to do everything possible. And I think guys like Tony and Scott, you know, Tony is, you know, it's his last official season. He's been around for a long time, but Tony's 44 years old and still super competitive. That's kind of hard to find in a series like this. You know, he's kind of like the Tom Brady's or the Peyton Mannings that are into their 40s and still throwing touchdowns. Scott Dixon is going to be around for several more years to come and still at the top of his game. It's great to see the desire that these guys have and women, but it's great to see that they are inspiration for the younger generation coming up. You know, they're role models and they embrace that as ambassadors of the sport. That's gratifying to see these young men become older men, so to speak, but grow with grace and age and still be at the top of their game. It's just, like Alex said, it's mind-boggling. I think our team doesn't really understand. You know, even I take for granted these relationships that we have with them because they're just regular people. And then you go to the track and you have people asking, you know, oh, there's the guys from PitFit, or they, you know, you get recognized somewhere and then, oh, you have such a lucky job. And you know, it's like, well, it's not luck. You know, we worked really hard to get to this point. And being around these people is just one of the perks of the job that we don't take for granted, but I guess sometimes we just don't realize how amazing they are.
Right. So last question for you. Not everyone knows the original Iron Neck, which was a 15-pound behemoth of a crown. But you got a hold of one of the original 250 or so that our founder Mike Jolly launched back in 2013 and 2014. What was your first impression of the original? We call it the OG Iron Neck. And you know, what do you remember from kind of first meeting Mike and learning about it?
Well, the first thing I realized is Mike had the biggest arms I've ever seen in my life. He was gigantic, super guy, and I knew right away. You know, I don't think he even knew what he had at that point, but he was super passionate about it. But it was a tank. I think it might have caused more injuries than it helped at that point. It was so heavy. Just to wear the thing on your head, I think compressed your spine a little bit. But, you know, the concept was unique. Nobody had anything like that. It was definitely something that was needed at the time. But there were obviously some things that, you know, needed a change. I knew right away from day one that we had to have one of those. And you know, obviously there were some things that we used it right away. It was difficult to put on. There was glue in certain areas. And I think they might've been almost handmade at that point. It was just one of those things where they weren't really rolling out as smoothly. But Mike was so passionate and so focused, and I loved what he was doing. And, you know, I love supporting new businesses and small businesses and just being a part of somebody else's growth. I think it's kind of like my oxygen to see somebody else growing what they're doing. But then as it evolved, you know, he kind of restructured his team a little bit and things got better and better. And I actually met you, Robert. And the first time I picked up the next generation of Iron Neck, it was literally 1/4 the weight, you know, maybe half the weight, but I thought this is great. And then another one, the latest one that came out, I mean, you can balance it on 2 fingers. It's so light. I don't think people realize what a dinosaur that other one was, but you know, you have to start with something, right? I mean, the first Model A, the first car wasn't, you know, it had wood floorboards and there were no shock absorbers. So things evolve over time. And the great thing about Iron Neck is that they've looked at their product and said, just kind of like what we do. It's like, what else can we do? How can we make this better? You know, this is the input from our users. They told us this, they've told us this. Okay, well, we need a lower price model. Then you produce a lower price model. And then you got into the rehab side of things. And you know, with all the focus on concussion, I think Iron Neck was the first neck device I remember seeing really embrace the concussion prevention model. Really, from a material standpoint, from a training standpoint, everything. And, you know, the company continues to grow. So it's amazing. If you would have told me when I met Mike at the NSCA conference years ago that this was, and I think that was in 2003, that it would be the product it is now, I would have said, I just don't see it. But Mike's a good example of knowing he had more in his hands than he could handle, and having the new team on board, I think is grown it to where it is now.
Yeah, well, it's been great to have you as a partner over the years, and, you know, see how you've taken our tool and taken it further and continue to innovate with it. You know, obviously excited to see your racers continue to get stronger and win more races, but, you know, we've always been of the belief that, hey, you know, we've got this great tool, but it's only as good as the people that we're putting it in their hands and the real experts in their field. And, you know, if you're coming at it from one angle or one sport, you know, you're going to have a completely different vision that someone from a different sport might have, but you can actually take some learnings from, you know, what sport A is doing and bring it to sport B and see how it can be reapplied. And so, you know, you guys have always been at the forefront there. You've certainly pushed the boundaries with your Iron Neck table tennis matches. I think certainly the only place on the planet that's ever occurred. But yeah, we'll certainly bring that to light. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for taking the time and sharing your insights. Where can people find you guys on the internet and social media?
PitFit.com, just real simple. And then our social media, Instagram, it's PitFit Training. So all you got to do is look up the hashtag PitFitPrepared, and you'll see a slew of things from not just us, but from our worldwide family who have embraced us. So that's the best way to reach out to us.
Great. Well, thanks to Jim Leo and Alex Wanee from PitFit Training. Wish you guys continued success, and thanks again for taking the time.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Take care.